Northern Ireland Alternative Timeline Season 2 Episode 7 The Attack on Their Soil. Welcome back to the news. There has been a recent attack in Northern Ireland after a group of teenagers were protesting. They began trashing shops in Derry City. Authorities have retaliated with this message. I will say this to all people who are attacking. Why exactly should you attack? This vote was designed so that we end attacks. This vote was designed so that we have everyone the opportunity to listen. This was designed so that you can trust politicians, so that you can say finally that politicians will eventually now and never, they may not have beforehand, but now they shall, in fact, not be bad, not be unrepresentational. This should be not something that should happen. This is a bad thing. This is a sign that we need to crack down on what is going on here, okay? From now on, we shall be introducing stricter controls over this type of thing. Now you might be wondering what those controls were. Unfortunately, that was not said in the interview. Now we talk with them over the phone about what the controls are. So you recently said that you'd be introducing controls into trying to stop this sort of attacks and things. So what exactly are you going to be doing? Well, basically one of the main things that we'll be doing is we'll be introducing a much stricter punishment for this type of thing. And this type of thing can get you up to a year in prison. However, I do not want people to think that we are going backwards. We are not going backwards in history. This is not going to be internment. People are going to have a full trial, and only people who have been found with unwitting evidence, total evidence, shall go to prison. This is simply to point out to people that just because you're right, just because you're doing this, doesn't mean you can get away with it. Because I understand, rioting is not something you want to ban. Banning parades, banning marches, banning protests, that's not a good idea. People march when they don't believe that they can democratically just say to their politicians, when they think they can't democratically just talk to people and say, well, we want this. That's when people protest. And that's when protests begin to turn to riots. And that's the point I'm trying to address here. Because these are things where this was not a protest that turned into a riot. I understand that protests can turn into riots, because that's what happens. People are angry, they're passionate, and then they feel they need to do something. And obviously, they're not trying to use violence, so of course, some people will end up using violence. But this was not a protest. This was an indirect attack. This was young teenagers attacking things. Outright, not a protest. I understand, I'm not banning protests. If violence breaks out in protest, obviously that is different. That is a situation where the people who actually do the violence are the ones that are responsible, not the people who are organising protests, not the people who are attending the protest. The protest is not the issue, it's the actual violence that's the issue. But what exactly will the punishment be? Well, as I've said, that there will be a possibility of a prison sentence, fines, and this sort of thing. Now, obviously, our government is committed. I mean, our party specifically is committed to stopping this sort of idea of, I guess you could say, harming of people. So we will be, of course, improving the educational system. One of the places we're going to be doing that is teaching children a little bit more about their own history, because when you look at these sort of things, for many years history, do you know that at the current moment you don't really learn much about our own history, keep in mind, because we only really learn about English history. You have to go to certain schools just to learn about our own history. I'm not talking about Irish history, I'm talking about our history, Northern Irish history, and that's our point. So that if you don't have this sort of thing, then yeah, that's what's going to happen. So do you believe that this was a nationalist or unionist protest? Well, at the moment we don't actually know. Because, well, to be honest, to us it's not clear. We haven't introduced any policies that have been directly nationalist, directly unionist. I guess you could say we have dealt a wound to both parties. So it could be just a simple thing of either one, really. The point is, we want to get beyond this. We really do, because, there were protests, of course, before the campaign. Before we were elected, there was protests and there was attack ads made against us. However, we did manage to get them banned in some areas. Really, it's all about commitment, because if you can really understand this, and I don't mean to be offensive to people, I understand it's difficult. I understand if you've got a particular view, if you've got a particular idea, it's difficult to think, well, I'm not getting it across. And I'd like to send this message in. If any people who are doing this are listening, please understand this. We're listening. We're listening, and we're not like those parties, because we will offer solutions. And that's why I'm going to announce this. It's called Politics Talk. It's a time that we spend talking with people. So if you have any issues about our policies, or just about politics in general, that we can affect, or just to talk about it, just so we know the issues that are affecting you, we'll listen, because we want to listen. Because unlike other parties, we're not the kind of people who stand by and simply let voters vote for us and then take control. We listen to voters because we believe that democracy is true democracy, is what I'm saying. It's all about the voters. Because just because someone votes for you doesn't mean they want to keep you 3 years later. If someone decides 2 years down the line that they don't want you, but the election hasn't come around yet, but by the time the election does come around, they've decided, well, you're the best candidate. Well, they haven't affected anything. And that's the point. That's why we will be holding Political Talk. Hope you've enjoyed this message. I hope that I've put your fear at arm's length, and that is enough. So please, do not cause violence, because we really, really don't want that. It is a bad thing to have, but I understand it. So please, if you have any issues, talk with us. We're listening. Unlike others, we are listening to your concerns. Well, thank you for going in. In other news, a recent expose discovered that a man had been killed. He came from the south of Ireland to Northern Ireland and was killed by an OUC officer. The OUC officer in question actually admitted to killing him. However, the OUC officer is not in custody. So, did you think that was good enough? Good enough retaliation? Well, I don't know. I mean, I think they might disagree with your kind of prison sentencing type thing. But I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that personally, I think it'll be good enough that you introduce the political talk show thing. I think that would convince people that they could trust us. Convince them. Well, I mean, obviously, you're serious. It's going to be an actual political thing. You're going to actually listen to them. Well, yeah. I'm sorry, do you understand this? I became leader of this party, and I put forward this party because I knew if anyone was going to do something about some of the BS that's involved in this country, I would have to be involved in that, because at the end of the day, do you see anyone there doing anything of any worth? Because I don't. I just see parties around the world, they do pass their politics, except the issue is, that's the best option that's available. You can't say, oh, let's vote for the other options that we haven't voted for before, because guess what? They're not any better, they're all bloody worse. That's the thing. You vote for the other parties, you know what'll happen? Absolute ruin. In England, if you vote for the Conservatives, you're effed. If you vote for Labour, they're not known for being the best, but you're probably less effed. But if you vote for another party that's emerging, that's dictatorial, if you vote for a dictator, you're effed. If you vote for some sort of a different kind of a monarch of controlling you, then you're effed. My point is, democracy, as I see it, is also the best of the bad bunch. You know? So I'm just trying to improve the best of the bad bunch. Because otherwise, you know what happens? People just begin to dip down in the democracy. You know what the issue is? When people vote for democracy and then they vote in a party that's just stupid. Then they think that a dictatorship or another version of government is better. Except guess what? It actually isn't. It's just that the democracy they have is full of absolute shit. Yeah, I understand that, but how exactly does that help? Well, I'm just trying to make it so that this democracy is not a shite democracy. So this democracy tries to achieve its full potential. That it is a true democracy, and that means voters can actually listen to their politicians in an actual format. They can trust their politicians, and guess what they can also do? They can continue their democratic right, which they don't have, by the way, in other systems. And keep in mind, they do not have, or they think they have, but they're wrong. And in this system, I'm letting them actually have a democratic right. Because why exactly should I bother to go to the trouble of designing a policy that doesn't even benefit them? Because all you're doing there is just tricking people. I mean, I just tricking them for the fun of it or something. Because can I ask you, how does that help me? How does introducing some of those policies help me? Well, you know, if you like a particular policy, then yeah, I may like a particular policy, but I may be an idiot when it comes to that particular policy. I may be a complete idiot when I come to that particular policy. Just because you're intelligent over other things doesn't mean you're intelligent over everything. Do you understand that? Or are you so bloody stupid that you can't even understand that sometimes you're not always the most intelligent person when it comes to individual policies, that sometimes you make the wrong mistake, or else you're just self-serving little shite, you know? I don't know, but I just think, they won't be happy. You're taking power away from the politicians, and they won't be happy. Yeah, I know they won't be happy, but that's the problem. You see, they're wrong, and if they want to voice their unhappiness, well, then they can voice it because that is their right. But guess what I want? I want my people to have their right, because they should have their democratic right as they should have. Because otherwise, what is the point? Because no one should be allowed to just vote over them. Because, that's just stupid if they are. Thank you for listening to this, the final episode in this series of Northern Ireland Alternative Timeline. If you want this to come back for a third series, then you can just say so below in the comments, or email us at smithcocustomers@gmail.com, or you can just just view it. Actually, I mean, it could come back if it just gets viewed a lot. Although if you don't like it, give it a thumbs down, because that means that you're certainly telling us you viewed it but you didn't like it. Because I mean, sometimes you view something and you're like, it's like you're addicted to it, but it's like it's still rubbish and you want it to end. So in that case, give it a thumbs down, because that way we know you viewed it but you didn't like it. So thank you for this. And if we do come back for the series, hopefully you'll come back.